Hey, I'm Jeff Straw. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to talk about collaboration. And after we get through a couple quotes and the definition real quick, we're going to get right into the benefits of artistic collaboration. After we go through those, I'm also going to give you 6 tips for successful collabs, so please stick around to the end. In the words of James McAvoy, the well-respected actor in Hollywood, filmmaking is a miracle of collaboration. It never ceases to amaze me when I look at the credits after a movie, how many people work on a feature-length film. Here I am shooting little YouTube videos by myself where I'm the cameraman and the talent and the scriptwriter and the editor and the list goes on, right? And so if you're a solo creator, you know what I'm talking about. However, you know, I'm pretty limited in what I can do. I don't have support of a big team. I don't have a graphics department or a CGI department or, you know, full buildings full of people to make movies. That being said, it's incredibly fulfilling to do all of this myself. However, somewhat limited. Another great quote about collaboration in the music space is from Pharrell. And Pharrell says, "I learn a lot from my experiences and collaborations. Most of my collaborations are meant for me to learn." Here's a guy who, by all intents and purposes, is a hired gun to come in and write hits with artists. And so to hear him talk about the fact that he is still in the mode of learning from these collaborations is first of all really humble and speaks to his character, but it's just a great thing to aspire to as artists, you know, maybe who haven't achieved the sort of notoriety that a guy like Pharrell has achieved, right? So we go into collaborations with an open heart and an open mind, hoping to learn. So what's the definition of collaboration? Well, it's a noun, and according to Oxford, it's the act of working with another person or group of people to create or produce something. So what I like about this definition is, first of all, it's the act of working, which means a collaboration doesn't happen just by sitting around and talking. We actually have to push our sleeves up and get to work. And clearly, I think the part that's sort of doesn't really need to be said, but is that this doesn't happen when a person works by themselves. This happens when 2 or more people or groups of people produce or create something together. What does that mean in the artistic world? Well, really, there's no limitation, right? The possibilities are kind of endless as far as the types of collaborations that we can do together. We'll talk some about collaborating within our vertical, a musician with a musician, as well as collaborating outside of our vertical, maybe a visual artist with a dancer. So think about, what does it mean to you to collaborate, and have you really done any collaborations yet? I'd love to know about those in the comments. How did they go? So some of the benefits, we're going to go through 4 of these. Right now, the first one is increased productivity and the ability to push boundaries. You know, often as artists, we get stuck in our ways, and some might say stuck in a rut. And working with other artists really allows us the opportunity to sort of get outside of ourselves. The experience of working with someone to see their workflow and their creative process up close and personal is really, really rewarding. Now, it may or may not ultimately influence the way you make art on your own, but the experience of creating art with another artist always leaves us richer. The other piece is that, like I said, it can really lead to a massive increase in creativity simply because you're not creating your ideas in a vacuum. You have the ability to bounce them off of another person who's vested interest in creating something really cool as well. So along these same lines, like pushing boundaries. So the Beatles and the 2 core songwriters for the Beatles, clearly Paul McCartney and John Lennon, worked together for years. And I'm a firm believer that they pushed each other to the limit of creativity. And when you look at the songs that they wrote in the early career of the Beatles versus what they were writing towards the end of the Beatles were very, very different. And one of the big factors for that, aside from perhaps some LSD use, was that the 2 of them really pushed each other creatively to get better, try new things, both vocal processing and studio techniques, as well as just songwriting techniques. I also want to draw on some personal experience for you guys from these. And so as a photographer, really one of my favorite ways to collaborate with other artists is to grab another photographer, pick a location, and go and shoot together. And the way I see things and frame things on a shoot with another photographer are very different than simply how I would go and shoot, especially urban stuff, which is what I love to do. I love to go to San Francisco and shoot. And first of all, it gives me a subject, a human that I can use in frame so I can take photos of this other photographer. But even if we're not shooting each other, it's a fun way to do this because it pushes me outside of my comfort zone. So I have a good friend, Alex Colson, him and I have shot together on numerous occasions over the course of my career. He's a very good friend of mine, but he's also really pushes me as a photographer. I have a couple examples here of a very, very early shoot that we did together. Right when I first got my camera, I was super excited, and I'd never shot at night. And so he pushed me to say, hey, let's go do a night shoot. And looking back at these now, like the edits are not quite on par with maybe what I would do today, but I'm still really happy with these images. I just simply wouldn't have ever captured these if it wasn't for the fact of collaborating with him and going to try something new. So this is the Palace of Fine Arts at night. Interesting story is that 2 of these 3 that I'm going to show you guys, I've actually sold aluminum prints of. So I did large scale enlargements. This shoot led me to have enough creative output to also get my work featured in a couple galleries up here in San Mateo and the Peninsula area outside of San Francisco. And so this was a really big moment for me, right? Like having these printed. If you've never printed your work, that's a great, as a photographer, that's another just whole topic for a video. But seeing these on aluminum, they looked really good. They really caught the light well. Here's another example. This is the Capitol building in San Francisco, clearly at night. This was shot, I believe, during Chinese New Year, which is why the building was lit up like that. They light it differently for different holidays and different sports themes, and it's always a cool place to shoot, but I had never tried it. So both of those 2 sold, and then this is just a really fun piece. This is Lombard Street at night, so that's the curviest street in San Francisco and potentially in the country, I'm not sure. And then in the background, you can see Coit Tower and you can see the lights of the Bay Bridge. That art exhibit up there in the top right, that finally just went dark this past week. Again, the edit on this, like I definitely would have done a little bit more. At this point, I was really just editing in Lightroom. But again, we grow as artists as we progress. Again, just a push to go and try to work with other artists. And so personal experience says that this is true. So benefit number 2, diverse perspectives. Some artists lean into their cultural heritage and it becomes a massive part of their identity. Others, maybe not so much. But the fact of the matter is that when we collaborate with people that are outside of either our gender, our race, our sexual orientation, it brings a different perspective to the work than we are able to bring in and of ourselves. You know, I can't help but bring my own personal experience to my work. So I have a 48-year-old white male American perspective. Not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. It's just simply my truth, right? And so when I create art, that's the framework and the perspective that I bring to the table. So when I can collaborate with other artists outside of that, it brings a richer diversity into the work. The example here from Ramos Martinez is the calla lily vendor, and really a massive part of their output was driven from and drawn from their cultural experience and heritage. For me personally, my first DJ partner, we were DJ F and Clutch. This is a photo shoot, my very first photo shoot as talent back in 1999 in Times Square, New York. In the winter, we were freezing our asses off, and this was shot by a very talented photographer named Seth Kushner, who has since passed. We miss him dearly, and he was an incredibly talented and well-respected photographer, did tons of magazine covers, shot tons of artists. It was a big deal for us to work with Seth, and also just a big step up for us to have a gig in New York and to be able to do this photo shoot. That's not the point though. The point is the diverse perspectives that when Martin and I got together to work it really created something magical, I felt. He is Puerto Rican and Cuban, and on the surface, we're very different. During these days when we were writing music together, it was just so healthy for me to have someone to bounce ideas off of and work together in the studio and to hone our DJ performances. You know, we used to come out and do 4 turntable performances, live drummer, live MCs, live vocalist, me playing saxophone. We were pushing boundaries and we were bringing our own diverse perspectives to the music and to the performance. Number 3 in this benefits is improved skills. So while, you know, we're gonna maybe pick up workflows from one another, workflows can be pretty personal and there's not necessarily a right or wrong way to do things. However, there are certain fundamental skills within art that we do need to pick up. For instance, a painter really needs to understand the mechanics of working with paint, working with his brushes, and yes, they may break some of these rules down the road, but they're going to be a better artist when they have rich and deep fundamentals. You know, some of us have had kind of classical training in fine art. We've got college degrees. I have a degree in music engineering. And so I learned a lot about that art form in school and the proper way, and someone else who just simply is self-taught. Both of those have merit. However, you've got to pick up these skills one way or the other. So another great way to pick up skills is to work with another person. Inherently, we're going to have a different bag of tricks than any other artist that we work with, and we can skill share. We can teach each other the things that we know. This photo is from Colorado College, and they did a cool little YouTube video on this process. And essentially, this artist from Haiti collaborated with an Asian student, and they did this huge mural together. And it's a really touching piece, but it shows that in collaboration where one person clearly has more experience than the other, it doesn't always have to be a one-way street with skill sharing and idea generation. And so if you've got a couple minutes, click through and watch the video. But this speaks to me, this speaks to teacher and student roles. I've been a teacher in the music business and the music sort of education space for a long time, and I love it. I love being a mentor, I love being a teacher. When I collaborate with someone, I don't expect to always take on that teacher role. In some cases, I like to, also be learning. And I think that successful collaborations inherently have that more of a two-way street. Otherwise, it simply feels like, oh, you're the teacher and I'm the student, and maybe I should be paying you for this, right? There's nothing wrong with that. There's private lessons through art and all these sorts of things. When we're able to wear both hats, the teacher and the student, it generally can become a really successful and potentially a long-term collaboration. Skill sharing, as you know, is one of the tenets here on YouTube. And shout out to Vid Summit. The first time I went to Vid Summit, I had just started this YouTube channel, and I met Jeven Dovey, who has at the time had roughly 400,000 subscribers on his channel. He's just about to crack 1 million, which is super exciting. And him and I got to talking at the conference, and we really hit it off together, and he said we should go shoot something together. I was floored. At this point, I think I had 25 subscribers on my channel, right? I had no exposure whatsoever. I knew that I was a competent photographer. However, my video skills were really, really basic, I felt like, at this point. He was doing a review for a new gimbal, the Jeven Weeble S, and the video that we ended up creating together on his channel went over to have 125,000 views, and the one on my channel probably had about 100. But I'll link to both of them in the description below. The coolest part for me was that even though Jeven had been running a production company, he had this successful channel, he teaches people how to be better creators on YouTube, I was still able to provide some level of value to him in that I shot all the B-roll for his video. I was able to get cool shots of him using this gimbal so that he could use those shots in his review, and I shot the thumbnail image. For me, this was such an amazing learning experience to work with another YouTuber that was clearly much further ahead than I was. And it was still a very mutual respect sort of situation. This wasn't the kind of thing where it would become a long-term collaboration. We knew that going in, it was gonna be a one-off, but it was still really fun for both of us, and we've kept in touch, over the years afterwards. The number 4 benefit of collaboration would be greater exposure. So usually how it works is the two artists that come together are somewhat similar in stature, and they both have their own separate audiences with maybe a little bit of a crossover point. And so the work that they create together, when they both release it to their respective worlds, whether that's digitally or physically, inherently there will be more attention and more potential engagement around that art, more people to see it, more people to listen to it. In the dance music world, this happens a lot through remixes. It's a big part of how the music is released and how it's created. And essentially, if you're not familiar, the original artist will bounce out stems of their music, meaning just the vocals, just the drums, just the synths, just the bass, etc., and send those parts to a remix artist or another music producer, who then reassembles the song in a way that they like by adding a ton of new elements themselves and probably rearranging the song to a certain extent. A lot of times they will also just switch the subgenre, which speaks exactly to this greater exposure. So they have fans of their own that they're going to add to potential engagement of the release. And if they do a different genre, let's say a tech house remix, and the original is more of a straight up house track, then it's going to have a different audience, right? And that's part of the reason why you do remixes in the first place. Yes, creatively they're fun, but it's to open up the original and the remix package to a different audience, a different set of DJs that could play it, etc. So those are 4 big benefits of collaboration. I hope you resonate with some of those and you're excited to get out and try something. So quickly, I wanted to finish this video up with 6 solid tips for successful artistic collaborations. Here we go. Number 1, this is important, find the right partner. Network with other artists, make sure that their work that they create on their own resonates with you, and you're not gonna know that unless you listen to their music, you look at their photography portfolio, you see what they're all about on social media, right? Do your homework, especially before you commit to a long-term project or even a short-term collaboration. Make sure that you're a fan of what they're doing and that you see some potential crossover with what you're doing so that there'll be some common ground in the art that you create together. Number 2, set project expectations. Don't limit each other, but at the same time, it's very, very healthy to know going in, what are we gonna do with this once it's completed? What's the scope of the project? And then how do we plan to release it to the world, to the general public? Are we just making this for fun and it's gonna hang in one of our studios? Maybe this is a bootleg remix that we'll never really see wide release, but we both wanna be able to DJ with it in our sets. Like, you need to have these discussions before you get to a finished product, simply because it will make that process much smoother throughout. Number 3, I always never know how to do. Number 3, discuss inspiration. You may be able to see some of this other artist's inspiration from looking at their work. However, you might not, but you want to have those discussions. Part of that is to unlock some creative juices and get them flowing, and potentially you guys can find common inspiration, and that can be a great starting point for a project. But especially this is important when you're collaborating outside of your vertical. So when you're working with somebody that doesn't do the same thing you do, a photographer and a musician, or maybe a film director, and you're working on a music video concept, you need to discuss inspiration so that you guys can find common ground in what you're about to create. Number 4, outline your typical workflow. This is really good just to get the bare bones of how do I work projects start to finish. That way you've got a pretty clear-cut roadmap of how you usually work, and you can get the same for them, and then discuss anything that you guys don't do that's similar. And if there's a drastic difference in one of your workflows, you can kind of talk it through instead of like building up a resentment halfway through that they work so differently than you. Kind of goes with project expectations, but on a very detailed level around workflow. Number 5, be mindful and open to feedback. So creating art is a little bit of a soul-bearing kind of experience, right? We all feel a little bit naked when we're creating art, and it can be scary, right? And especially if it's your first time collaborating with this other artist, you can feel very exposed. And so we want to be careful when we are giving feedback and when we are hearing feedback from the other artist about this thing that we're creating together, that it's coming from a place of mutual respect, it's coming from a place of love, and then it's coming from a place that, we really just want to see this final piece of art be the best thing that it can be. And so it's not necessarily a personal attack when there's feedback or criticism around the piece itself. Honestly, that comes from a sense of trust and mutual respect, and that kind of is developed over time, right? So you're not inherently going to have that right away, and so you want to be just very careful about feedback. Make sure that the person is open to hearing it in the moment, and do the best you can to also be open to that sort of feedback throughout the project. And lastly, number six, there we go. Number 6, I forgot it. Number 6, be committed and accountable. It's not a collaboration if only one person is holding up their end of the bargain. I've been guilty of this myself, sort of starting a project with a bunch of energy and then it kind of becomes back burner. And it's simply just par for the course. But if you're really serious about the collaboration, you want to do your best to stay on top of things, communicate well with the other person, and make sure that they know where you're at in the process. And if you're in the same room working together, stay on task. Don't be on your phone, right? Just stay present through the process. And if you're working remotely or in separate locations, make sure that you're giving updates in a timely manner. So thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate your time today. So, if you heard something you liked, share this with another artist. Maybe it'll kick off a collaboration for you. But again, I'm Jeff Straw. Please subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the video. Hit that notification bell, and I will see you in the next one. Go create something awesome.